Welcome to the Jordan, not the Jordan. I just like saying his name, but welcome to Latter Day
Welcome to the
Lobster
Jordan Peterson
podcast.
podcast. We are not
I
Michaela
wish,
Peterson.
I wish, you know what? One day I hope to be on that podcast, but it'll probably never happen.
I was gonna say, me too. I
Yeah,
get that. I
that
get that.
Allison is, I hear she has a few foots in the door with Jordan Peterson, and maybe his wife. And I'm
Well,
like,
I think the best story I've heard so far. You have to tell the Book of Mormon story. This is too good.
okay, okay, yeah, I can tell that story. So, um, I think this was 2019. So Jordan Peterson, his 12 Rules for Life book had come out, and um, he had dates all over Utah, but not in Utah. So he had some in Colorado and California, and I think even Nevada, not Idaho, but like within like the Mormon corridor, like not really, right? And I'm like,
Yeah,
this
yeah,
is so
yeah.
odd. I know Latter-day Saints are like really digging Jordan Peterson. I can hear the like him touching on like bits of our doctrine, and so out of the blue, this was in October, right? I think the weekend of General Conference, like maybe 2 weeks before General Conference, he announced that he added a date in Utah. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. And like I need to meet Jordan Peterson. And and I had recently bought a home. And so I bought this home with me and my brothers. And so we were kind of like still trying to figure out how to make ends meet, sort of,
Yeah.
in a certain way. And I told them like, look, guys, Jordan Peterson's coming to town. I want to get tickets. They're like, okay, that's fine. And I'm like, okay, but I want to get like VIP tickets to meet him. And they're like, okay. I'm like, so that means I'm going to spend a lot more money than I normally do. And they're like, what are you saying? I'm like, I can pay the rent, but it might be like a day late or something. And they're like, okay, that's fine. Just go. And so we did it. And so I bought Jordan Peterson tickets, VIP. And then I think that same week, my cousin Nikki and her husband Jordan they had also bought Jordan Peterson tickets. And they also he works for an airline, and so he gets a lot of deals on like hotels and stuff like that. So he got us a hotel downtown in Salt Lake. Anyways, I had read Maps of Meaning um in 2017, and so I was pretty
Oh, so you
familiar
wait,
with
wait, wait. So you read Maps of Meaning before you read 12
12
Rules for
Rules.
Life.
Yeah.
Wow, that's impressive. Look at you.
Thanks.
12 Rules for Life
12,
was like the first, I wouldn't say it's the first, but like I
yeah.
saw like a few YouTube videos of him, but that was like my first real introduction to it.
Oh, cool. Yeah, no, my introduction to him, and this is actually why I wanted to bring you on the podcast, because this is a tangent. I'll get back to the Book of Mormon story. In 2016, a lot of things happened in my life where like my life was flipped over upside down. Um, and that meant at the time that I had to postpone school. And so I couldn't finish my associates at the time. And so I was really bummed. I was really depressed. And I had heard about Jordan Peterson through like the politicos, like Ben Shapiro talking about like the free speech debate in Canada.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I didn't care. I'm like, I don't care what's going on in the political world in Canada. But I heard then that he was a professor at the University of Toronto and that he put his courses online. And I was like, oh, I could like watch those. They're free. And it's kind of like taking a college course. And I might as well
Yeah.
be learning while I'm not in school and working through all this stuff. And so I'm like, okay, sure. So he had his two courses, Maps of Meaning, and then he had his other course, Personality. I saw Maps of Meaning and I was like, this is a little complicated. This is a little bit like this. He's like laying down the groundwork for like some huge thing. And I'm like, okay, so I'm gonna watch his personality lectures first because it's an intro class. And I did, and I was blown away by like the insight. And it was funny too because I had taken a psychology course in high school. It was like an AP Psych course. And one of the things that really bugged me about psychology when I was in high school is the fact that psychology had different schools, and they seem to have different assumptions, and they seem to like disagree on a lot of things. And to me, it felt kind of like you know how like when you read Joseph Smith's history and Joseph Smith talks about the different like congregations and how they all disagreed. Um, and to me, it felt like, well, you have a bunch of bickering factions within this field that disagree with one another, and therefore, like, this doesn't seem very credible to me. I took the course and I passed it and it was fine, but it didn't really capture my attention. Um, and so I kind of had a negative view about psychology and like why it was worthwhile in the first place. But then well, I didn't take it, but I saw Jordan Peterson's courses on personality. And you can watch them still there. It's a 2017 series of personality course that he gave. And like the first thing he said was like, well, you might say, why take this seriously if all these different schools exist and they all disagree with each other? But that's actually what he argued in the video was he says, I would argue that's actually a sign of an expanding field and a growing science because,
Mm.
and I was like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense because psychology is a pretty new field, and of course people are going to diverge and of course disagree with each other. And so that like instantly like removed the doubts that I had about that in like the first 10 minutes of his video. And then I saw the whole course, and like I said, I was blown away by his ability to teach, and to like give powerful explanations about I think like pretty complicated subjects in a way that were like interesting and easy to understand. I mean, they're not super easy to understand, like, but if you're in college, you could probably understand them. And so I was just blown away at his level, like his passion for teaching and his passion for like teaching well and for um, being able to like make his subject and his field of expertise just so accessible to a lot of people. And I was like, whoa, this is amazing. Like this is high caliber teaching. This is incredible. And then I watched his Maps and Meaning course, and that was like he was primarily trying to answer like a religious question, and like kind of like how science and religion interact with each other, and why they're in conflict and how that can be resolved. And for me that was, and not only that, but like why would different ideologies and different religious sects and political tribes, why would they go to war to each other to the point of like total annihilation? And so that was really gripping for me. And like I said, and him being such an amazing educator, and I mean, he puts his content out for free. I'm like, man, I wish all professors did that. Um, if I ever become a professor, I am definitely doing that. So, anyways, throughout his Maps to Meaning course, um, I was like, he's touching on gospel principles here that like are kind of unique to Mormonism. At least in my view, they're kind of unique to Mormonism, or they're explicitly like obvious. For example, you have the famous scripture in Second Nephi about opposition in all things, and Jordan Peterson gives kind of like a logical, philosophical argument for why that's the case. And then even in Maps and Meaning, towards the end, he brings up the fact that like there's opposition in all things and there's suffering that's built into the fabric of existing and in the reality. And I was like, wow, like this guy needs a Book of Mormon. He needs to read this. And so anyways, I went to General Conference. I actually had gotten tickets to General Conference. So I went to Salt Lake, got a hotel, was at the hotel, went to conference. That was a good conference session. And then I think the day before conference, it had been leaked online or something that Kanye West was giving a special performance
Oh,
in
I remember
downtown.
that. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. And that was really cool because that was his it was Kanye West and Sunday Service, and Kanye had like really become super Christian at that point. And so I
Mhm.
was like, this guy, Kanye West is an icon, and he's like trying to put out the word of God into people, and he's doing it through art and music and rap. And I was like, this is really cool. And so it was like General Conference, Jordan Peterson, Kanye West on the same day in the same like few blocks from each other. And I was like, wow, this is like a really epic day. And so anyways, I'm in line so the lobsters that we're all aware of this, and some of us have gotten tickets. I know Milton was there. I didn't really remember him at the time, and he always gives me crap about this. um he's like, I met you, and I'm like, I remember sort of, but like there's other friends there that I had known more, so he was kind of like a new face there. Anyway, so we all had like our 12 rules for life books, and we were all there excited to see him. And so all the lobsters that were in the group at the time, we all met there this was at a Bravenel Hall.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so, that big pillar of fire artwork that they have
Yeah,
there.
super
So
cool.
yeah, so we all met there and like took a picture. And then I think me and Aaron Harvey were the only ones who had VIP. I can't remember who else was there, but anyway, so we went there and we got to meet him. And then I had like I had Maps and Meaning with me, 12 Rules for Life, and I had the Book of Mormon. And I was like, I for sure have to give this to him. And so I got to like spend like 30 seconds with him to take the photo. in front of the screen, and then I sat like it's like a Bravana Hall, like the stage is right here. I'm like
Yeah,
right
yeah.
here. Jordan Peterson is like right there. I can like touch him. Um, anyway, so before he gave his like special Q&A for VIP, I was like, Dr. Peterson, can I talk to you? He's like, oh, sure. And I introduced myself and I said, hey, I wanted to give you this book. It's really meaningful to me. I think you're gonna really like it. And and I gave him the Book of Mormon, and he's like, oh, he was kind of like, it seemed like he didn't know what to think or something, but he's like, oh, thank you. I have a stack of these on my desk. And I was like, and I was like, yeah, that's awesome. I'm sure you'll get to them sometime. And he's
Yeah.
like, yeah. And then the Q&A started. I wish he could sign my book, but he explicitly said like, I'm not signing any books today. And I'm like, oh, that what a bummer, because I had brought like his 2 books. And
Just in case, yeah.
yeah. So anyway, Anthony, thanks for joining us. Yeah, I wanted to bring you on here, Ben, specifically because I want to cover just a lot of topics today, but primarily about Jordan Peterson as an educator. And you're a professor at BYUI. Tell us a bit about your experience as an educator, your career so far.
Yeah, I'm happy to. The only thing I want to start with is that I do not speak for anybody other than me. This is just me talking. This is not, my comments are not endorsed by the university or the church that sponsors it or anybody else. So I was a middle school math teacher for 6 years in Baltimore City. Middle school is a very special, unique place, and it was really fun. I actually really, really like working with the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. That's like my age range. They're old enough that they get your jokes, but they're young enough that they're not too cool for school. And so I really have a good time with them. And then I was an assistant principal in Washington, D.C. for 4 years, and it was awesome. It was really hard, to be honest. So I was not a very good teacher my first couple of years, but I figured it out, and that made me feel a little bit better. So then I came out here to BYU Idaho, where I teach future teachers, and it's the job for me. It's just absolutely amazing. It feels like if God had made like a very specific career just for me, that this is the right one. And it feels pretty incredible to know that you're in the right place at the right time. I think I first stumbled on Jordan Peterson probably 3 or 4 years ago. And I think it was just some random YouTube videos, and I thought, this guy's interesting. This is thoughtful. But I can still remember when I read his book. I had seen some YouTube videos before, but when I read the book, I thought, this is really good. Because when he first came out, everyone was talking about how he was either super transphobic, that was one take, or he was a courageous conservative. Those are the only 2 takes. And I was like, yeah, I don't buy either of those, but I also really want to know, like, okay, he presents himself well. What was going on there? And when I heard him argue, so one of the first things that I saw was him arguing in front of he made a statement to some legislative body in the Canadian government. And he basically said, what I am going to do when I meet a trans student has nothing to do with why I'm here today. I'm here today because there's a river we never cross, and that's to enforce people's speech, not just to prevent people's speech. It's not to say, here are some things you can't say. That's things we need to be careful about, but we've done occasionally in the past. This is now the point at which we are going to compel people to speak the right way, and if not, there will be government action, not private people feeling uncomfortable, not speaking up for each other, not those things, but prisons and jail time and fines, and that's a different sphere. And it was just really impressive. I remember him talking through it and going, wow, I've never thought about it this way. It was also kind of during the time when there was the first set of real cancel culture in universities was kind of really thick in the air. And he was one of the people that was just getting screamed at, and he was very patient with people, and he said no, and he kind of did it in his Jordan Peterson way. He said, no, that's silly, right? And he uses the word silly a lot. And I remember thinking, if he can face down a mob of really angry students, this is somebody that I'm interested in listening to. And then I read the book, and it was not political at all. I shouldn't say that. It was not overtly political, meaning that there's lots of undertones to it that obviously are. There's personal responsibility. There's all of that kind of stuff. But he's a lot less conservative as a politician, and he's a lot more conservative in terms of his worldview. And so that was something that really meshed with me. The other thing that I would say is, when I listen to Jordan Peterson, I think there are 3 things that he hits for me that are really, really meaningful. One is just the psychology, the education, the background that he has. Like I like his take on topics because it's consistently thoughtful. The second one, I guess four. The second one is he has an appeal to men in particular. And I think it's because there's just some good old fashioned kind of dad advice in how he talks. And to be honest, like I've seen people who don't, how do I say this? I know a few people who I wish had fallen for more in line with the Jordan Peterson stuff, and instead they went off with other people. And those other people are crazy, man. Like they go into some really weird stuff, right? And like the internet's a weird, creepy place. When I was growing up, it was like people, the really edgy kid was like maybe a little bit of a Democrat, or might even say like, I'm a democratic socialist. Everybody go, right? That was kind of like, that was where American politics was. And now you'll talk to somebody and you're like, hey, so what's your politics? And they're like, oh, you know, I'm a radical anarcho-capitalist. And I'm like, cool. So are you for Reagan? They're like, yeah, Reagan was pretty good. And I'm like, so you're just a Republican? Like, why is everybody so extreme right now? Anyway, a number of people who aren't Jordan Peterson really concern me. So when I see people who are going with Jordan Peterson, they're getting their lives together, they're making their bed, right? They're improving their lives. And when I see people going down the path of the YouTube black hole, it doesn't always lead there. And I think that that's something that's really compelling to me, is like he has some of that. So one is just like the psychology and the education stuff. One is his kind of appeal to men. I think the third thing is the way he talks about religion. I think that his viewpoint, as far as I can tell, is at a minimum, religion is the stories we pass on that are meaningful to us as a society, that teach us how to act, that teach us how to think, and all of those things. And I think that I'm still not totally clear on whether he is personally religious or not. Like, I don't know if he goes to church. I don't know if he actually thinks that God exists, but he does believe in the moral life. He does believe that the symbols are incredibly powerful. And he says that in a way that I find to be really meaningful. And I honestly, something that I said recently was, I'm amazed that those leaving religion don't take his views more seriously, because there are so many who are so quick to throw the baby out with the bathwater. If you believe God is a farce, if you believe that it's all a joke, I can respect that position. I'm a very much a positivist myself. If there's not evidence for it, I have a hard time with that. That's the part of my brain that works that way. And yet, if I would say, but these are still meaningful traditions that have passed along for millennia, that speak deeply to the things that matter the most. I don't understand how people can be so quick to dismiss, instead of saying, if we wake up tomorrow and there's no religion in the world, that's going to leave us in the lurch. There are going to be a lot of people who rely on that for story, to order their lives, to think through things. And I think Jordan Peterson really speaks to that in meaningful ways. Let's see, I talked about religion, the men, the education angle. There was, and the last one is higher education. I don't mean this in terms of being an educator. He talks about higher education really thoughtfully, about what the academy is supposed to be, how it's supposed to be a place where bad ideas are shot down, right? This is partially cancel culture, but it's more about like, what is the role of the university? It's to expose you to ideas, right? I think that came through with that first hubbub over pronouns. But I think that he's really held his own and said, you know, he's had professors on who are trying to get, or who people are trying to cancel. And he's been a very thoughtful voice. You know, Jonathan Haidt and Jordan Peterson, I suspect, don't agree on a whole lot, but they agree on some things that are really, really important. And so like, I consider myself kind of a Jonathan Haidt, Jordan Peterson fan, right? Like, it's not because I agree with him with everything. I mean, I like to joke that Jordan Peterson's really easy to make fun of, right? Well, like, you just put a lobster on something and now you've made fun of Jordan Peterson. But at the same time, I really think that he's right on a few things that a lot of people aren't. And so even if he's a little bit funny and he's kind of a little bit quirky and he's you know, all of that, that's fine. I think that he's hitting on some things that are really in the culture right now. They're, for lack of a better word, they're cultural pressure points that are really, really meaningful. So I think that's my very quick version on, not very quick, on Jordan Peterson and why I think that he's doing so much good.
That's awesome. Yeah, I totally agree. I think he's kind of like, well, academia in the first place is kind of like a very big maze, especially if you've never been to college, your parents have never been to college, you don't really know what you're doing, and you don't really know how to navigate those waters. And so he's also a therapist too. So one of the things that Milton talks about from Lobsters, Milton McLean, is your effectiveness as a therapist doesn't necessarily always come from the type of therapy you give. It comes more with the personal connection you have with the client. And so his career is, he's a therapist and he's a researcher and a university professor. And so the tools that he has in his tool belt to like connect with people, he uses those all the time when he speaks with journalists or when he gives a presentation or when he speaks in his classroom. And that to me is, well, for me, it's salient and important because I want to become a therapist, but also um, he does bridge a gap, I feel, with people who have left religion behind. And one of the things I continually see in our lobster group, and like I said, it's a free sort of like free space where people can talk about whatever they want. And the topic continually comes up. Jordan Peterson has changed at least, how I approach religion and why it's important. And I'm not so ready to throw it out with the bathwater. I'm like, some people will even come back to church, and I've seen that happen where the vocabulary that Jordan Peterson sort of offers people helps them talk about religion in ways that I think is meaningful. Because what happened was in 2016, when my life was flipped upside down, one of the reasons that happened is because my father passed away. And so you can imagine that's a huge thing. I was about 23. And so when I started going to church, I was always active in my whole life. I was served the mission and everything, but I was deeply wounded. And then when I was at church, that place for me was like, well, that's a place for healing, like, because people say it's a spiritual hospital or whatever metaphor they want to use, but Christ himself is the healer. And so it's like, okay, I'm hearing what I'm in YSA ward too. So that adds a layer to this story. I'm in YSA ward and I'm hearing these students, undergrads mostly, talk about their faith. And I'm like, the way that they're talking about this just doesn't make sense to me. It sounds like a part of it is like platitudes, another part is like it's just not logically consistent. Um, and also like I don't know what these terms really mean, and they're sort of just like asserting their opinions about them. And it didn't feel comfortable. It didn't feel like home to me. And so um anyways, like I said, I started watching Jordan Peterson videos, and when he brought up religion, I was very interested because he was able to talk about it in a way that like made sense. And I suspect a lot of people say that Jordan Peterson is very like Jung influenced, and I think he is, but I think more than that, he's very like Hegelian, and he takes like opposing things and he does the synthesis, and he really says that this is how this source of information maps onto this source of information, and we can talk about it in a productive way. um and so I'm like, yes, this is what we need to do at church, is like, because the way that we talk about things at church doesn't map onto my lived experience. And so we need to like synthesize those two things and say, this is how the gospel is applicable in your life. And I've done that and with certain things. I remember, like I said, I read Maps of Meaning. And then like right as I finished it, I think I was asked to give a talk at the singles ward that I was at. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, let's try doing this like in kind of a Peterson type of way. And so the topic was having a contrite spirit and a broken heart. And so I like looked up a few things in Maps of Meaning, and I was like, oh, this might work. And then I like went into his biblical lectures and found some things, and I added those things into my talk, and I gave this talk. And I pulled from a lot of different sources. Who's that author? I can't remember his name. He's a Canadian author. He wrote The Great Code. It's a book about the Bible. I like quoted from that. I quoted from Peterson. I quoted from the Book of Mormon and all these things. And I tried to do it. I'm like, what? I tried to do it as if Peterson were to do it, And the response was incredible. People were texting me all week. That was the best talk I'd ever heard. The bishopric was like, that was incredible. Thank you for your powerful testimony. That was great. I heard about this for like 2 weeks, and I was like, okay, there's something here that people are responding to, that people are like, yes, this is making sense to them. And so since then, I was like, yeah, they're like, I need to, I need to like finish my studies and read and get on the ball and try to um make the way that we talk about the gospel more I don't know what the word is, but it's like more useful, maybe is the best word I can think of, where like people can really connect with, yeah, where people can really connect, like, and understand, like, okay, after hearing this gospel message, I now know what the next step is. I know now how to act. Because I think that's kind of what did it for me. It's like I understood now how to like act in tough situations or when things didn't go as expected. It's like my faith now, as I read over the Book of Mormon and the Bible, like there's an ethic that is like now more apparent to me, other than like what the commandments say. And so I thought that was really cool, and that's something I want to share with the world for sure, as many people as I can, because I think it's helpful, especially for people who are experiencing tragedy and it leads to a crisis in faith, um, or something like that, because everyone's gonna experience those moments where like family members pass away or engagements are broken off, and you're alone, or your marriage is in trouble, or maybe your community is marginalizing you, like all those things are sort of covered um in the Book of Mormon, and in our scripture. And then, like I said, doing sort of like that synthesis, how can you put that in words that people will connect with? And that's what I really liked about Jordan Peterson, and kind of how he has changed my sort of way of approaching the gospel. So
I keep seeing Anthony unmute. I want to give him a chance. I have some thoughts on what you said, but Anthony, if you want to go ahead, jump in.
For sure. Sorry, I'm just gonna turn this TV down a little bit. Got Cocomelon blasting in the back here because
I know the Pokemon life. You just climbed like 4 runs.
That's also why the lights keep going on and off, as my toddler is just playing with the Switch. So I'm just gonna turn my video off and talk. But yeah, no, I just was kind of listening to what you guys were saying about kind of like how it's brought meaning to a lot of people, kind of like reinvigorated the gospel for them. And I think for me, yeah, it definitely added that element. I think more than anything, Peterson and his talks on meaning, and finding meaning in life really helped me to kind of find more of my purpose and where I wanted to be. I was working at a job, I was making okay money, but just kind of day in and day out, like I just wasn't very fulfilled or happy. My family was where I was, and I just started listening to really like help me to like realize kind of what I was missing in a way that I could, achieve more than kind of where I felt like I was at. So they shouldn't have let me listen to it, because that's how I ended up quitting that job. But I decided, I'm going to take a leap and like, just kind of really do the harder kind of path, maybe in some ways, but like what I actually like want to do, what's actually meaningful to me, not what's expedient. Because that job was expedient in the sense of like, yeah, it paid the bills or whatever.
You're breaking up a little bit, but I heard you for a second. I can't tell if you finished or if you were just breaking up. All right, well, I'll jump in for a second then. And then if Anthony, if you come back, then just cut me off, because I think that it might be on my end. I hope it's not. Well, I was going to respond to something that you said, if I can, while you're doing your thing. One of the things that I've loved about the Peterson group, and just in general about the way that he talks about things, especially religious things, I think that we've all had mission presidents who've told us that's not important for your salvation. Stop worrying about that, especially when we get to deep stuff. And there comes a time when somebody's ready to go beyond milk, and they're ready to get to meat and potatoes. I think for a lot of us, it's really freeing to be able to say the gospel is simple, but it can go as deep as we're ready to go. And Jordan Peterson talks about things in a symbolic way, in a profound way. And he's not talking about just abstract symbols. Part of what I love about him is, there are people who go deep into the gospel, but they're going deep almost academically, theoretically only. They're just kind of throwing ideas out there and seeing what sticks. And that always feels a little bit off to me. It doesn't feel like that's the right idea. Jordan Peterson talks about depth in a way that to me speaks to his desire to be a deep Christian, as in he treats people this way. And I don't think he's perfect, but you hear him talk about this and it's very applied, right? It is deep, but he's not trying to connect the scriptural dates to find out when the second coming is, right? Like that's not his thing. His thing is to talk about, for example, what the symbols mean in the scripture and how that means he needs to treat his family. And that's really impressive to me. And I see that a lot in the group, but I also see that even just for myself, in Sunday school, we kind of keep it really light, and that's okay. And at the same time, I have felt for a while, we don't want anybody feeling left out, right? So we want to keep it kind of on those upper levels. And at the same time, there are a lot of people who are ready for a lot more. And I think that's part of what does it for me. I don't think I'm the only one. That there are people who want a much more rigorous intellectual conversation, and that feeds a part of who they are and their soul.
I mean, I know.
Interject on that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it just keeps dropping it out. But I was just going to interject and say, actually, I totally forgot. So never mind, just continue.
That's okay. If you remember, let us know. I think, yeah, there's definitely, there's a few motivations, I think, for people to sort of dig deeper into the gospel. One is, like, Sunday school is kind of boring, like, not gonna lie. But then also too, like, there's a lot of unanswered questions, because of course there are, especially in religion, and people want to, like, make sense of it, and then also people want to make sense of why we do certain things, like why don't we allow certain types of behavior, why can't certain people get married, why are only a few people allowed to pass the sacrament, whatever the case might be, right? There's a million questions about why we do things, and it's hard to get into that. And in Sunday school, like, you can't really get into that, like, you don't have the time to get into that, like, there's so many
well, it's just like culturally, like they're gonna look at you weird if you try to go into that, right? Like,
yeah,
I feel like we could make the time for some of these things, but how often is that on our radar? How often are we going to actually plan to do that? And like you guys have said, how comfortable we're going to be. And so I think there's a lot of cultural barriers to kind of getting deeper into the thick of things, and a lot of fears around, oh, well, if I don't fully say that I agree with everything or understand everything, then I'm going to be a social pariah. And yeah, it's a lot to fight against, that kind of cultural expectations or worries or fears. But I think we would be all better off for it if we did do that.
I think Anthony's spot on. Here's the way that I've kind of framed it in my head, and it goes to Alejandro, your experience. I don't think there's anything stopping us from having amazing sacrament meetings or amazing Sunday school lessons, right? I think there's kind of this idea. I asked my students the other day, one of them, so for one of my classes, they have to teach a lesson. And they said, well, can I teach over the pulpit? Can I give a talk? Does that count as one of my lessons? I said, sure, but it better be amazing. And they said, well, it's a sacrament meeting talk. And I said, what do you mean? Why did you say it doesn't have to be amazing? Because it's just a sacrament meeting talk. This is how we think. And I said, okay, I want you to go and pretend that you're doing a lesson for people that you really care about, right? Build the lesson that way, and then give it in the form of a lecture, in the form of a talk. And so I don't think, sometimes people feel like the way to get deep is to be really controversial, right? And to bring up really hard stuff. I'm not sure that I would go that route, because there are people who might be in there who need to be reinforced. But at the same time, there's nothing keeping us from saying, like, hey, let's make this a phenomenal, life-changing experience. I was in a bishopric on the East Coast before I moved out here, and I told the bishop at the time, good friend of mine, great guy. I said, I always aim for life-changing, and if I get a little bit lower and it's just really fun and really spiritual, hey, that's okay with me. Right? I was talking about, like, youth activities and stuff. But if we go for, did they show up and did they have fun? Like, that's not what they need. They can show up and have fun at an Xbox party, right? They can get that in so many different places. I want this to be spiritually meaningful for people. So yeah, I couldn't agree more on that. Anyway, Alejandro, go ahead.
So that actually reminds me of another experience I had. And this might bring us into a few other topics. So in 2018. Yeah, this is 2018. In 2018, I was called to do what's called social media ministering, and it's a project ran by it's actually a pilot program ran by a few professors at BYU Provo, and they specifically answer to Elder Ballard. And so it was kind of a big deal, and was trying to get people to engage in social media in a way that was in a ministering way. We're trying to minister to people, and the professor, who's a PhD in communications, he knows his stuff. highly respect this guy. He's a great person. If you want to know who it is, just DM me, but I don't know if I can say it right now. Um, he called me, and he said, I want you to work on this project. And I don't know anything about like communications. That's not my major. But he gave me a set of slides and said, this is what we're going to be presenting to different wards and stakes in Utah County. And we want them to join this group, this online group and on Facebook. And this is our goal. And I said, okay, sure, let's do it. And so I looked at the slides and I liked them. They were fine. But I was like, I'm also going to do a Peterson approach to this. And so I like redid the slides, all of them, added pictures, added a few symbolic things into them. And I still kept his points, I just bolstered them with some of the stuff I was learning. And I gave this presentation at wards at BYU, wards at UVU, family wards, Spanish wards, everywhere. And the response that I got from them was incredibly positive. There was I think, I can't remember which stake, but it was a YSA stake. The stake president came to this because it was a pilot program. And they're like, we don't know what this is. We're supposed to be doing other things, but you have this pilot program and we're sort of off the course and we're nervous about what this is because it's a pilot program and we're worried about not following what we're supposed to do. So we're going to come watch this and we want to see what you're about or what this pilot program is about. So I gave this presentation at BYU and like I said, the response was incredibly positive. The high councilman and the stake president that were in attendance were like, this is amazing. We want to learn more. We think this is going to be highly successful. And it made certain gospel themes like forgiveness and ministering and what it means to be Christ-like. It gave it kind of like a social media spin. I know that's not like the most important way to be Christ-like, but that's definitely a way to be Christ-like is on social media, the persona that you sort of give off, And the whole thing was based on Elder Bednar's talk that I think he gave at Education Week. I can't remember which year. It must have been 2015 or 16 or something. But I think you've seen it, Ben. I've shared it on Twitter. I think you've shared it on Twitter, and a lot of people shared it on Twitter. But anyways, yeah, so we were having a lot of success, and then the pandemic sort of happened and like things sort of got all crazy. So I don't know what the status of the pilot program is, but my point is like helping people, engage in any endeavor, but especially the gospel, because I think the gospel is like one of the most meaningful things that we have. Helping them engage in a meaningful way, like is that's invaluable to me. Like if people can walk away from church saying I had a meaningful experience or I had a spiritual, they wouldn't even say that. They said I had a deeply spiritual experience. That's how they would describe it, is when they experience like that deep sense of meaning and connectedness. Anyway, so I had a lot of success in that program, and for me, that's why like social media comportment is super important to me. And Jordan Peterson is like, he has mastered social media. He's successful on all his platforms. But yeah, like being Christ-like, in person is super important. Being, having a meaningful experience at church is like the most real thing you can experience, I think. And then, why not share that type of experience on social media? We should attempt to share that type of positivity on social media. And I think that's what like Elder Bednar, I think, is ultimately trying to get at, like, make short, meaningful, not complicated messages that you can share with your friends. And I see like not that happening on social media. And to me, it's like really it bugs me a lot. But that's all I have to say about that.
Anthony, you go ahead and then I'll respond to a couple things about social media.
Yeah, I mean, social media, I think it can be greatly used for good as a tool, right? And it also can absolutely bring out the worst in people, myself included. There's that kind of sense of anonymity. Sometimes there's that you're removed from a person, right? You're not like there with them, and the way you talk to people when you're directly like seeing them or like with them is so different than when you're just kind of like over a keyboard, right? And so there's definitely a lot of contention. I feel like the most contention is before, like a Mormon in the church goes on with themselves, like in the context. Now it's more kind of mediated online, right? And it's interesting, it's like most of kind of where we hear our news is online. Most of where our political views and opinions comes from a lot of things online. And so quite the, okay, sounds a bit awkward, quite full of oxen, if you will, but at the same time, it can really be force for good, force for community. And I've seen that personally where, it's the Jordan, right, the group, the lobster group really gave me so many different friends, like Alejandro, like so many people that I've gotten to know because of that. And at the same time, there's also a lot of warring voices, that I sometimes enter the fray into as well. And again, as I'm kind of going through this faith transition, I've been finding a lot of support and community that way, and being able to attend church online, things like that. And so definitely I'm trying to be more intentional with my social media usage. Still not there, definitely not. I'm working on that. Not perfect, but I think it can be done, and I thought there was so much wisdom in when President Nelson invited I think it was the youth to stay off social media for a week, and a lot of people got on about that, but I do believe that's a good thing, to take those breaks and to kind of just get back into your own self, get back into like what's immediately around you, and be present is so important, because it can be so easy to kind of lose yourself in social media in things that aren't really grounded, like literally physically grounded around you. So just some thoughts on social media for me.
No, I think you're exactly right. And I will say, not on your behalf, but in your defense, I don't think that we agree on everything, and you've always chosen to engage honestly. And I can't tell you how much that means, because there are people who are just there for the next click. They're there for the next, I'm going to say that cutting, there's a comic that I like. It says, "Remember, son, if you can't say something nice, then say something clever but devastating." And it feels like that's how social media is, right? It feels like it's all about saying that next thing. And I've joked with people, like, I come off on social media like such a goody two shoes. I can't even stand it. Like, it makes me sick to my stomach. But the reason is because it's so hard to communicate with people. Like in real life, I joke around, like we have fun. Oh no, now I've lost both of them. Now it's just me sitting here talking by myself. Welcome to the new Lobster podcast. I'm going to undermine our leaders while they're gone. No, I'm not. I'm going to finish talking about social media, and then I'm going to stop monologuing, and I might just let you all go. But let me finish about social media real quick. First, I couldn't agree more with what Anthony was saying about anonymity. I think it's really, really important that we avoid it. And I think Elder Cook said this, I want to say 10, 12 years ago, and it has just been more and more prophetic to me. I think the anonymity thing is a huge deal. And I didn't expect it to be this strong. I recognize, by the way, that there are cases in which people need to be anonymous. I'm not making that a blanket rule. I know that there are lots of exceptions, and that's fine. But I think many of the people who think there are exceptions aren't. And in fact, a lot of us, when we actually look at it and we look at it really honestly, we go, yeah, I actually act better because my name is attached. And I try harder to connect with people and to listen to people. And I think that's really wise. To your point, Anthony, I think my rule has been anytime social media starts feeling like it's real life, I disconnect for a while. And I remember that real life is my kids. Real life is my job. Real life is my wife, right? Real life are the relationships in real life that matter to me. And that doesn't mean that they aren't real people in social media. Don't misunderstand. But I think that for some people, if you stay on social media long enough, you can start to think that it is real life. One of the quotes that I like to give is there was this great, I think it was a Pew Research survey or something, and they found that Twitter is about as liberal as the campus of UC Berkeley. And it always makes me chuckle, and I got to find that article because now I've repeated it enough that I don't even know if I could find the citation if I tried. What's interesting about that to me is not that I'm saying that it's bad to be liberal or anything like that. I just think that if we're not careful, we see a reality that isn't there, right? And then I go to church, and honestly, it's people from all different political stripes. It's people who understand things way differently than Twitter does. Like it's a completely different context. The other thing that you mentioned was that I really liked was, I've gotten good out of social media and I've also gotten bad. And there was a researcher that I'm reading, because I teach classes on this, and they said basically the same thing. Being on social media doesn't point you in either direction. It's the quality of the community that you find. It's whether they're cynical or whether they're optimistic. It's whether they drive you to be better or they pull you down. And if you can find those good communities, it can actually be incredible and life-changing. And so I find that to be really compelling. I think that's a good way for me to think about it, at least.
No, definitely. I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. And I think, again, the biggest thing for me now with Facebook is definitely that kind of community aspect, trying to, especially, after the pandemic and all the isolation that's kind of resulted from that. And just the nature of like where I'm living right now, and kind of our situation, we don't get out too much off. Like sometimes I just go to work, come home, go to work, come home, not that I don't love both, of course, but just being able to like, interact with people outside of those kind of domains is really important. And I think social media can kind of help, fill that in a lot of ways, until you can actually like, go and physically see people. And so, yeah, I think that's one thing. And I think that's one thing that's interesting within the lobster group, is trying to kind of like find that happy medium, because it's just so open, and so there's a lot of people that might be kind of more like on the dragging down side of things, and the people that are more like, let's focus on, actually interesting, meaningful, engaging content. I definitely have probably been across that whole spectrum in that group, and so it just really is what you, and I can admit that it's just what you make of it, and kind of what you contribute, I guess, too.
On the other hand, I'm Mr. Ned Flanders in the flesh, right? Like being like, be nice, everyone, right? But it's super silly. So I think I did it. I was like, I'm gonna go really hard on this. Let's just see how it works. I was like, I'm gonna be as annoying as possible about this for 2 weeks. I must have gotten blocked by all the annoying people, because every time I'm there, it is such a great experience. Like, I don't argue with anybody. People are nice.
Yeah.
They actually listen to me when I talk. I just feel bad for whoever was like, I can't stand this guy, but it totally works for me. So it's been fantastic.
Sure, yeah. That's a good like, I guess, social experiment, is that the word? Just like,
yeah, no, exactly.
People,
And
inviting people to be more civil,
well,
I guess I did have some.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's interesting after
just to get kind of get a better understanding of your, yeah.
Sorry, now we're doing the thing. I'm going to let you go.
Yeah, we're doing the thing.
Really.
Okay, I'll go. Okay. I was just going to say, I'm curious too, to like understand, because I know that your podcast, from what I remember, kind of focuses a lot more on like civility and things like that. And so how do you feel that kind of has played into just, I guess, like your experiences online and things like that? Kind of what kind of inspired you to want to do this?
No, it's a fabulous question. So part of it is that I've always just been a little bit of a goody two shoes, and that's fair. So if people see me and they're like, oh, this guy, don't worry, I feel the same way. But I felt, so this was probably around 2006. No, that's the wrong time. Sorry, this would have been 2015. Sorry. I could see things starting to spin faster and faster. So it was right around the time when Huffington Post was like really big, and everybody was talking about white privilege. And I remember seeing a friend of mine, and I had heard about white privilege, and I was like, okay, like that makes sense. There's some good in that. There's some stuff I don't agree with, like, but it's fine. And I remember talking to a friend, and they were so mad about this idea of white privilege. Like, I could feel the anger emanating from them about this topic. And it's like, I don't actually think that privilege is, I don't put it on either end. Super useful, everybody needs to know it, or like the absolute worst thing. But I had friends who were like, you need to hear this. And I also had friends who were like, this is evil, this is communism, this is Satan himself. And that's when I was like, something is wrong here. Something is broken. And then we saw it kind of personified in Donald Trump.
Like a way of looking at things. Yeah.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. And to me, it was always really useful.
It has to be like the thing.
To me, it was, so Elder Holland gave a talk a few years ago where he basically says, like, I've gotten things that I didn't earn, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. Right? There's no skin off my back admitting that. And he talks about, I think it's, I am not my brother's keeper, but I am my brother's brother, right? I have an obligation to do the best that I can. So Anyway, then Donald Trump comes by, and your positions on Donald Trump, if people are listening, they can have whatever they want to. I think that he weaponized this specific kind of political resentment in a way that was new. And I think that doesn't mean that,
definitely, yeah.
I don't think that's a controversial thing to say. I think for a few years, there were a few years there where people said, let's play identity politics. And he said, okay, we'll play that game. Let's play white identity politics. And as it turns out, that's really dangerous, because white people have an identity politics, and it's not one that I like, right? It's not. And to be clear, I'm not exactly in the woke camp either. I'm very centrist on this. Anyway, that's a very long way of saying civility has been an interest of mine since I was in high school. I love to discuss and debate with other people. When I was growing up, that was like the political capital in our family, was being in the debate, right? Being able to discuss and to defend our ideas. And then recently I saw friends like going absolutely bonkers because of the Donald Trump stuff, and like losing their grasp on reality. And like, I saw friends becoming depressed, and like social media really taking it out on them. And I said, this is not good. And by the way, I think the antibodies have been activated. I think we're getting better at social media. I think we're listening to each other more. I just question whether it'll be enough. But yeah, for the last few years, it's been my one guy in his home office just saying, hey, we should actually pause for a second and see, what's going on here. One of the examples I like to use is everybody goes, oh, you're just trying to control me. And I'm like, yeah, and so is Russia, China, and Iran, right? And so are the bots, and so is Facebook. Like, I'm absolutely trying to control you, but I'm being really honest about it. And so, and I will say, after conference, it's been really cool.
Yeah.
Elder Cook, Elder Renland, and Elder Holland all gave talks specifically hitting on civility. And since then, I have heard a number of people, including from a very specific hashtag, that I think you know who I'm talking about, who've tried.
Not at all. Yeah.
But like, really shocking and really exciting for me, and I say this as genuinely as I can, a number of people, including some big names in that group, have said, hey, we need to be better. We're not being good disciples.
And I genuinely want to give them the benefit of the doubt, and I hope that they will do that. And at the same time, I know I need to consider that just as much as they do. I have my blind spots and my faults, and so I really appreciated those messages in conference about civility, about love of God, not having contention among us. One of the things that's always been compelling to me, and that I've always wanted to see happen someday, is that Zion society, right? That lack of contention in people's hearts, myself included, because I know that I'm prone to that. And so it was just cool to see that theme come up so much in conference, and it really struck me. I wasn't sure what to expect with this conference, but I was really, really pleasantly surprised. Not that the past ones have necessarily been bad, but when you're in the midst of kind of this crisis of faith in terms of the church is concerned, like, it was just kind of what I needed to hear at the time, and so it was really helpful in that way. And I think hopefully we'll start to see some ripple effects from that, as much as people are taking it seriously, both
I
online
completely
and
agree.
offline.
Well, and it's interesting because I think I told you before conference started, I said, I suspect that this is going to be one where we hear what we need to hear. And then I told a friend, like, it felt to me like conference was speaking specifically to me. And then I also said, I asked my students, I said, hey, what'd you get out of conference? And a student was like, oh, I love that part where President Nelson said it was going to get easier, except no, he never said that. And it's like, yeah, you're right. And so I went home and I journaled. I was like, this was a good experience. Times are going to get harder. I want to remember how I feel right now, because I suspect I might need it in the future, because things might get harder.
Remembering and recording those experiences is definitely meaningful and helpful in my experience too. So.
And at the same time, like I said before, and to be clear, there are still people who use that specific hashtag. There are still people being rude. I know I come across as super arrogant online. It's something I'm trying to figure out. But at the same time, really good people are trying their best to engage and listen to each other. And that gives me a lot of hope. And by the way, I'm not defending the indefensible. The people who have said stuff using that hashtag, I have no patience with, right? Like, I'm not trying to defend any of that stuff. But the fact that a lot of people are saying, wow, we need to listen a little bit more. Like, yeah, absolutely. We all do, right? And for some of us, it's masks and vaccines. For some of us, it's being civil online. Everybody has their stuff, and that's hard, and that's okay. But as long as we're trying our best and we're listening to each other, that's something I'm willing to do. I was going to say, by the way, really quick before I forget, you wrote to me after I wrote my piece in Public Square magazine, and it was funny because I mean, you were pretty blunt, and I appreciate that. But you'd be surprised at how excited I was because no, it was like, I'm not even kidding. It was good. And here's why, because that same day, somebody had actually talked about the same piece, but they had blocked me and then they subtweeted me. And instead, you like we had a conversation. And I think I told you at the time, like, one of your pieces of feedback that was so good was, I think this was you. Tell me if it was somebody else, but I'm pretty sure it was you. You were like, hey, you don't get to make the call about whether you're safe. Like, you don't know if you're safe for other people. Like, you can try to be safe, you can do things. And I was like, oh, that's really good feedback. Yeah, no, I can't say that. And like, it's okay. I think people know what I was hoping to get at, but like, that's a good change. That's a wording change. And I think that's what happens when you engage with people. Like, you become a better person when you hear from thoughtful people that are actually trying. And so I'm grateful for that.
Definitely. Yeah, I just, like you said, like the whole like block and subtweet thing, I never really liked that kind of a tactic. I'm like, you kind of got to go to your brother and talk it out. And so I feel like you said, like, I just made it. I mean, we're talking to each other now, right? It's not like, like, nope, Ben, he's evil, he's off. Like, I never thought that. I just was like, I don't disagree. Like, I appreciate what you're doing. I might not agree with everything at first, that from what I understand, but as you get to know people better and talk with them, then it's like, oh, okay, like, we can figure this thing out.
Well, it's funny. A buddy of mine read the article. He said, oh, that was so great. I loved it so much. And I said, oh, thanks. That's really nice. And then two other people walked in and they were like, and he was like, have y'all read Ben's article? And they're like, no. And he said, oh yeah, it's really great. I agree with like 80% of it. And I was like, bruh, you just told me you loved it. Like, what are you talking about? But like, that's okay. Like, that's normal.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
but yeah, it's just so much better, I think, when people, like I said, are just willing to engage directly and just not automatically assume the worst of the other side.
Exactly.
That's a really a cancer in our kind of like the way we're just kind of like talking to each other in society. And I think I've always appreciated that effort. I just think of also I think someone else that comes to mind is Jacob Hess. With his kind of talking about politics in a similar vein. Is good. And then even like I said, Jonathan Haidt, right, with the righteous mind and all these things. So I think as we kind of embrace that mentality more, things can only get better, hopefully. But
well, this has been a pleasure. I'm happy to talk more. I got a jet here in a second, but I'll let you close things out.
For sure. Well, thank you again for being on the podcast. We really do appreciate it. Even with all my little chaotic kids here, but yeah, definitely. We hope people will, keep tuning in for these and provide any feedback they have. But really did appreciate having you on the podcast. It's just great to get to know different people, in the group and kind of hear more of their life story. And so we hope that this will encourage people to continue to do that. But yeah, no, thank you so much, Ben, and best of luck with everything. Hope things go well with you in school, at home, and all that. So it was great to finally actually like talk to you and see your face. So.
No, totally agreed. And I love what y'all are doing. So keep it up. All right, we'll talk soon then.
Take care.